All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, beautiful people. Good afternoon, good evening. It doesn't matter what time it is. Just know today is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. Why? Because God is good. He's good all the time. Duh. Okay. Yes. Bam! Y'all. My bad, y'all. Bam! Y'all know we got to get back into the reading. We on chapter 10 today, y'all. Blood at the Root, A Racial Cleansing in America by Patrick Phillips, man. We got to finish. I've been taking too long. We on chapter 10 today. Okay. We on chapter 10. So y'all bear with me. I'm working on consistency. Have patience with me and keep me in prayer right along with everybody else, because every last one of us need it. Okay. Every single one of us is jacked up, imperfect. And if you really search the depths of your thoughts, your heart, you will come to the realization that even you are without sin and have fell short of God's glory right along with all the rest of us out here. So with that being said, ye without sin, cast the first stone. Don't be out here judging people when you know you jacked up too and you out here wreaking havoc. Your havoc may not look identical to mine, but the Bible says that God has no respect of persons. Therefore, there's not one sin that he prioritizes over the other one. He detests all sin, all sexual immorality, okay? So with that being said, don't judge me for my inconsistency. Charge my head, not my heart. That's what my mom says. I don't really know how I feel about that saying, but I will say, don't hold it against me. I'm human, okay? And I'm trying. This is just, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I'm trying, but I'm going to get more consistent, okay? Let's get into it. Chapter 10, y'all. Crush the thing in its infancy. I like the sound of that. Just a few miles east of Oscarville, also known as what we know today as Lake Lanier, okay? Across the Chattahoochee, there was another predominantly white county with its own poor and exploited black population and its own white underclass. In Hall County, too, race hysteria spread in the fall of 1912, and residents there witnessed a similar spate of attacks on black workers and black homes. But what happened as a result could hardly have been more different. Whatever racial tensions existed in Hall prior to the Forsyth Exodus, they were aggravated by the arrival of hundreds of displaced families. So you have to remember, it's kind of like, it's like homelessness. When the police come in, policing, all they do is displace you. They remove your homelessness where they came and harassed you. You know what I'm saying? Molested you, motherfucking uprooted you. And all they did was locate you somewhere else. It's the same thing that's referred to when it comes to crime in general. People falsely believe that increased police presence has an effect on the perceptions of crime and crime itself. Yet in a 1973 Kansas City preventative patrol experiment had studied to see the effects of police increased presence, whether you increase it, decrease it, keep it the same, which was the control group. And they have found that regardless of increased police presence, decreased police presence, or maintaining its average, actions, which was the control group, they have found that it had no effect on how we perceive crime. So the people who still perceived crime to be running rawshot still perceived crime to run rawshot, even with increased police presence. The people who perceived crime to have, little to no increase or effect on society maintain that same sentiment regardless police presence increase, decrease, or maintain. The same goes with crime. Crime it still happened to the same extent that it was happening. The only difference that they have found that in these areas that had police presence, instead of the crime happening at that place at that moment in time, it just occurred somewhere else. So there goes to show that it doesn't have any effect, just like here, right? Where we see that race hysteria ran Russia, okay? The tensions that existed here continue to exist here. It didn't matter what the freak was happening. Hall didn't care what was happening over in Forsyth County because at the end of the day, the way they see it is like, bro, we don't want them here either. And that's kind of like how people are with the homeless population. This is why homelessness is criminalized. People don't want them in their neighborhoods, in their locales. So what does the police do? Take them off the street and throw them in jails and prisons for being impoverished, for being poor, indigents. But let's continue. But what happened as a result could hardly have been more different. Whatever racial tensions existed in Hall prior to Forsyth's exodus, they were aggravated by the arrival of hundreds of displaced families who camped along the roads leading into Gainesville and crowded into homes of friends and relatives in the African American sections of town. Kind of like what we see with homelessness now. The same thing we see with this influx of immigration. Nothing against them. However, you tend to see them highly overpopulated in areas, groups that's already exhausted. And when I say exhausted, I mean, when you look where I live, off of Dewey Avenue in Rochester, New York. I live closer to Dewey Avenue as it leads to Emerson, right? That side of Dewey Avenue, although it don't matter what side of Dewey Avenue you look like, majority of Dewey Avenue is impoverished, whether white or black. However, you see the segregation take place because the further Dewey Avenue gets to the beach, it becomes white impoverished. The closer that it gets to the city, the closer that it gets to Lowell Avenue, it becomes black and impoverished. And in between there's these sprinkles of immigrants, which we've had a higher influx here in Rochester between the Asian community, the Middle Eastern community. That's been like the most, but for the most part, it's this influx. So when these black people are displaced from Forsyth County, they're going to do like the average person. They're going to fall upon comfort. Ideally, they're not going to move to areas that are homogeneously white, but they're going to move to areas that look like them, have similar financial setups as them, educational backgrounds, and it tends to be your skin folk. You see what I'm saying? And so now you got all these black people who's been displaced from motherfreaking Forsyth, now contributing to the homeless population. It said that they're literally camped along the roads leading into Gainesville. They're not even legitimate, housing structures. It's camping sites along the roads leading towards Gainesville. So that would be equivalent to like an expressway, a highway, you know what I'm saying? Something like that. These are now homeless people who've been displaced from one location to the next. And none of the issues that contributed or led to this incident have been addressed, have been fixed. Only thing that happened, a white girl was abused and later died from her injuries. So ultimately she was murdered. White anxiety brought them to think that it was the outside people, even though data to this day have shown, and it has shown for several decades, that you are more likely, based on data, you are more likely to be assaulted, to be murdered, to be raped, anything of this sort by someone that you know versus a stranger. Stranger to stranger assaults, rapes, murders, and stuff like that is very rare. You're more likely to be harmed by someone you know, which regarding this young lady, May Crow, she 9 times out of 10 was abused and harmed by someone she knows. But because of white anxiety, people fears the other, you know what I'm saying? Then you have the racial tensions. You got people who falsely believe that the resources and services that they once were allowed to utilize have been depleted by outside factors, which over time it's been depleted in general. And it ain't got squat to do with the race of the people. It got to do with the people in charge, because they are the ones that decide how funding and services and resources are disseminated amongst the masses. Individuals don't have that power. You see what I'm saying? So now you got all these homeless people, all these motherfucking superly impoverished people. And now it also contributes to the crime factor, because many people know crime and poverty, they go 2 and 2 with each other. Now, I do think that that eliminates the idea or the actual actual fact that crime isn't necessarily linked to poverty in a sense that you're impoverished, you're going to be a criminal, because we see that there's what is referred to white collar criminals, wealthy people engaged in criminal activity. It's how it's carried out, how law is carried out, how law is defined, how law is interpreted. That's where it varies. That's why you see wealthy people, what they would call or consider white collar criminals, evade jail and prison time. And a bunch of poor people go in there, because at the end of the day, most criminality is based on finances. If you could pay your way out of it, you will never see a day in jail or prison, which is why rich people don't ever really see prison time, jail time. That's why majority jails and prisons are full of poor people. It's not because we disproportionately commit the most crimes. No, we are disproportionately arrested, charged, convicted, you know what I'm saying, and punished harshly than our wealthier counterparts. And that's the same thing that goes here, is that these people will more likely end up in the criminal justice system, end up in the carceral system. Because why? They are easily accessible to the cops now, because now they went from law-abiding citizens, they went from hardworking individuals having a shelter, to now they're looked at as vagabonds. You see what I'm saying? Now they're looked at as these homeless people that just roams the street with no cares in the world, no motherfucking ambition to get a job or anything of the sort. And now they start applying these fallacies to these people because of the situation they are currently in, that was exacerbated by a combination of our government and racist white people who didn't know how to properly direct their frustrations, nor investigate a legit crime. But I digress. These are the same people who take up our police force now. Anyways, let's continue. Whatever racial tensions existed in Hall prior to the Forsyth exodus, they were aggravated by the arrival of hundreds of displaced families who camped along the roads leading into Gainesville and crowded into the homes of friends and relatives in the African-American sections of town. So now you got black people that's about to be, potentially harassed, because now their residences are overly populated by predominantly black people who are now subjected to homelessness. And all of the motherfucking negative thoughts and connotations that comes with homelessness. Because we can't act like there's no stigma attached to homelessness, which leads to unfair and partial treatment. But anyways, let's continue. The Gainesville Times told of a morning that October when a crowd variously estimated at from a dozen to 100 went to Mr. M.A. Gaines' building near the City Hall and ordered the Negro brick masons to quit work. The Negroes left the job as soon as they could get away and have not returned. So the building remains in an unfinished state. Chasing out people and then ultimately resulting in the dilapidation of their city, their residents, the infrastructure around their businesses. And you see, you so thirsty to kick somebody out, now the building will be put on hold. Now the work that they was contributing to ain't getting done. But these be the same people y'all call lazy and don't want to have a job, but you kicking them out of their job with threats of violence and murder. And it's crazy. Anyways, the Negroes left the job as soon as they could get away and have not returned, so the building remains in an unfinished state. Soon, local farmers were getting similar visits from men who demanded that black workers be fired and leave Hall County for good. The Constitution reported that on October 14th, a mob of whites appeared at the home of Joe Hood, a Negro living about 3 miles north of Gainesville. A spokesman demanded Hood's removal from the vicinity, but the Negro slammed the door in the white man's face. A fusillade of shots were fired by the crowd into the house. Hood, his wife, and family barricaded themselves behind mattresses, bedding, and escaped unhurt, although their home was riddled with bullets. Large holes were rent into the sides of the building, showing the effect of shotgun shells, and the entire side was peppered with pistol and Winchester bullets. All because they didn't want to leave. Close the door in their face and then their house gets sprayed by bullets. But in this society, you have people who literally continue to push this fallacy that how violent black people are, yet we historically have seen this history of white people inflicting violence upon not just black people, but every group of people in existence, including their own. Where the freak y'all think vagabond come from? That whole term, indentured servants. That's why white people be so quick to be like, white people were enslaved too. Yes, not in the United States though. That's the difference. The United States is like, it's the toilet of all the other countries. All the countries come to the United States and doodle into the United States, and then they flush their turds down, leaving their turds to be transported throughout the systems that leads them to govern us. So now we are governed by the descendants of England and all these other westernized countries, motherfucking turds. The same criminals that were exiled, you know what I'm saying, from Great Britain is now sitting here in the United States with their descendants governing us. Make it make sense, right? The same people sitting here calling us criminals not only have a long history of criminality themselves, but it's even in the midst of them trying to demonize somebody else, they can't help but show the mirror on themselves, because they violently try to express to you that others are violent and not them. We've seen it with COVID. Ferrucci, however you pronounce the dude's name, was just pardoned, yet nobody even knows what the freak he was pardoned for. Yet during COVID, they was sitting here praising him, giving him all these adulations and mother freaking just flattery. And then all of a sudden they done pardon him. What are you pardoning him for? Last time I checked, people get pardoned for crime. Trump is the president of the United States and he's convicted. Crime, criminal. Yet for some reason, criminality is associated with black people. Carmelo Anthony. This young man he's literally being demonized, and they taking every picture that they possibly can to make him look like this sadistic, vile criminal, utilizing the same racist rhetoric that they used during the minstrel times, during Jim Crow times, during civil rights times, even during the onset of the United States. The same rhetoric that were used, it's these racist ideas that were utilized to justify the oppression of certain groups. All the while, they making, the people that are considered the culprits, the people that antagonize folks, the bullies in a sense, they're made to look like angels. And I personally don't understand what is the point of this demagogic media outpour, when all you have to do is provide the facts. But no, because the facts will not render the results that they want. The results that they want is Carmelo Anthony, this little black boy who was accused of harming a white person, even though it was out of self-defense, even though we've seen it time and time again that white people harass black people all the time, Latino people all the time, Asian people all the time, And you'll have white people standing around watching it. But as soon as that person that is not that white person go and defend themselves because of the harassment that they are enduring or the challenge that they are doing, now all of a sudden they want to get involved. And now it's like, oh, you unfair. You being unruly, wayward, and all this wild stuff. This ain't no new phenomenon. This stuff continues to happen. And here it is. This is talking about 1912. And we are in currently 2025 where Carmelo Anthony is dealing with the same garbage. But let's continue. Just as in Forsyth, such attacks were part of a sustained effort to drive out the black population and especially black labor competition. Now, see, this is the problem. You make it seem like you don't have resources. You lack access to the services, but all you're trying to do is get rid of competition. It's not that resources and stuff is depleted. We've all have the same access to the same stuff. The only difference is that access gets tightened and tightened by the people who controls who gains access. The people at the bottom of the totem pole ain't the ones that gain the access. Yet we fighting over the access amongst one another, even though neither of us has the ability to give the other that access. It's the crab in a bucket mentality, honestly. And it's crazy because white people have been doing it for so long. And now I'm starting to see that other races of people doing it. Black people doing it, Latino people doing it. They literally reinforcing the same racist rhetoric that were utilized by hateful white people against black and other racial minorities just living life and existing in the United States alongside them. I don't know what it is about society and humans, period, where we fail to comprehend the concept that our existence is like every other existence in the world. We depend on diversification because it is linked to this mutual symbiotic relationship. And let me break it down in layman's where it's more easily understood. Us humans are just like vegetation out in the world, right? Studies have found that monocultural farming is actually harmful to society, and not just society, but like the environment. And why? Because it depletes the resources from the soil. It dries it out. It makes it to where it's harder to retain water. It's salt up. And then it's harder to get anything to grow in there. It becomes very arid. You see what I'm saying? But when you implement diversification, right? Because we see it in these monoculture. I mean, you just got to go into rural America, right? You see a whole farm or a whole field full of corn, just corn, or a whole field full of apple trees, just apple trees, Honeycrisp apples. And yeah, they may do well for the most part because they have to add all these additives to the soil. But there's several trees, there's several vegetation that dies, that dwindles by the wayside because it is not receiving what is needed. And it's not getting what is needed because everybody are the same. And so because everybody are corn, and since they're all the same type of corn, they all depend on the same nutrients, the same amount of water intake, the same access to light versus shade coverage. You see what I'm saying? Everybody is affected by the same diseases. So if some type of blight was to come through, it'll probably kill everything in there because why? They are all the same. And there's no one out there, there's no corn out there that's dealing with the structure of the soil trying to help save everyone. Why? Because they all the same. They do the same jobs. They perform the same jobs. They require the same resources. You see what I'm saying? And they're incapable of providing in such a large quantity when they all depend on the same. So if white people was to get what they want, or black people, or whomever out here who wants this homogeneously, I don't know why this word is butchering me, but if you want a homogeneously look to your environment, then go for it. But watch how you die out. We see it in these all white communities. There's usually about 10,000 people living there. They don't have the means to keep their infrastructure going. Their economy is almost non-existent. And that is why they depend on these areas that are like the metropolitan areas that are more diverse for employment, for education, et cetera, right? How many people live in places where you got to drive 30 plus minutes to get to a hospital? That ain't the case when you live in the mother freaking city. You within like not even a 10-minute drive from the hospital. And then there's usually like a hospital on every side of town. You see what I'm saying? There's parts of America, rural America, all they got is a True Value and a Dollar General. If you really ride out there, you'll see the dilapidation in their housing. Mother freaking roofing, non-existent. It's so torn down. They got vegetation growing in their drains. You see what I'm saying? It's a hot mess out here. And it's because they have tricked themselves into thinking that we can survive with just us. But that's not the case. We are, like I said, we are like the vegetation out here. We depend on diversification. We need one another because with diversification, there are things that you do that I do not do, yet those actions can benefit me. Here in America, you got a lot of people talking about services that, oh, the people are using. Let me tell you one thing that most people don't understand, don't know. But immigrants contribute to a lot of the services that only citizens are allowed to gain access to. Unemployment, Social Security. You see what I'm saying? Other welfare services out here, their hard labor contributes to it, yet they are exempt from utilizing the services. Yet you got people out here who think that immigrants are disproportionately using and exhausting these services. How? They can't even get access due to lack of citizenship. And then when you take aside lack of citizenship, then you see that there's people being left out based solely on other factors that we aren't privy to. You got people who wrongfully think that there's more black people on welfare than there are white people. There's a literal term, welfare queen, that is associated with black women, despite white women being predominantly those that are taking or receiving welfare. You have to take into consideration that society, when you disregard the disparities, society reflects population. There's about 330 million people that live in the United States. Of 330 million people, 60% of them are labeled as white. So since 60% of the United States population is labeled as white, that means more of them are going to be inside of jails and prisons. More of them are going to be utilizing welfare. More of them are going to have more access to jobs, especially when you look into when you take into consideration the fact that people are talking about people not being hired. You got jobs that hires more white men than anybody else. You got jobs that hire more white women than anybody else. Yes, they may have some blacks and some black folks, excuse me, because I don't like that blacks thing. Yes, they may have some black folks. Yes, they may have some white folks. Yeah, they may got some Latinos and some Asian folks, some Native American folks. But the numbers compared to the white people is drastically different. Yes, there are some nuances. But for the most part, this is how society reflects in the United States as it pertains to race. So yes, black people are disproportionately incarcerated because when you look at the way that policing is carried out, biases are involved. The police disproportionately stop, arrest, and charge more black people than they do white people. The same with the courts. The courts convict and sentence disproportionately more black people. But that doesn't change the fact that there are still a lot of white people. This is why I think the way that some people basically talks about data points is skewed, because people sit here and they push these fallacies and they don't really know how to interpret data. But the truth of the matter is that if there's 60% of white people that reside in the United States, then that 60% is going to reflect in every aspect, good and bad, social and criminal. It does not matter. So yes, there are more white people on welfare, even though a lot of black people, a lot of Latino people, a lot of Asian people are denied welfare, even if they attempted to apply. But most of them don't apply because of the stigma that's attached in being colored. Being white and on welfare is like, yeah, you might get labeled as trailer trash or white trash, but it's kind of like this expected thing. It's just like, you white trash, and we keep it pushing. But when black people get put on there, it's the end of the world. Now you welfare queens. Now you contributing to the bulk of crime out here because poverty is associated with crime. And since black women are disproportionately raising their children in single parent households with little to no money, it's most of y'all children out here wreaking havoc. And this is how society thinks. Even though we see in the world, and we ain't even got to focus on the world, we can just focus on the United States. Here in the United States, majority of the population here is poor. So if majority of the population here, over 90% of the U.S. population is poor, over 60% of the U.S. population are white, what does that tell you? Come on. Piece everything together. What can you infer from that? I infer from that white people make up the majority in all these spaces. If white people are 60% of the U.S. population and 90% of the U.S. population are poor, that means at least 90% of that 60% of them white people are poor. So they resort to the same systems and services and gripes and moans and complaints as the rest of us. Even though they try to make it seem like they don't, they do. Okay, let's continue, because I'm trying to educate, but at the same time, I want to get through this book. Just as in Forsyth, such attacks were part of a sustained effort to drive out the black population and especially black labor competition. Not only has the entire section suffered from the abandonment of farms and loss of labor from the fleeing Negroes, a journalist wrote, prominent businessmen of Gainesville have received attacks by hostile whites, prominent businessmen. Many black chauffeurs of the city have been ordered to give up their jobs, and anonymous letters demanding the dismissal of Negro employees have been sent. Now, do y'all see why people say that black people have systemically and systematically been oppressed? You had regular, poor, white people chasing out black people, sending letters to prominent business folks, threatening them, saying, you better get these niggas up out of here or we're going to obliterate your business. And what do white people do? Get up out of here, Negroes. But you got people out here who believe that racism is not something that is sustained at this moment amongst black people, that we're not dealing with these effects. Yet there are still people who have been displaced. There are still deeds that people have where it's like, my ancestors own this property, own this land, or whatever the case is. And we weren't legally absolved of these properties, these assets. We were just chased out by illegitimate means, literal criminal acts. Yet there's no one righting those wrongs. When black people start talking about getting monies back and we talk about getting some kind of return for the harm that we have endured, it's like people want to throw up. It's strange, y'all, strange. We're going to continue. While cooler-headed residents hoped that the violence would remain a local matter and not damage the Gainesville reputation as a center of trade, on Saturday, October 12th, the mobs of Hall County made headlines all over the state when the Southern Railway's flagship New York and New Orleans Limited stopped to take on water at Flowery Branch at the southern edge of the county. As the train idled, passengers en route to Atlanta looked out their windows and were startled to see a mob dragging a black man down off the train. The man named W.A. Flake worked in the mail car, and it seems that the mere sight of him in his uniform was enough to enrage local whites. They snatching up this man and then on his job while he at work. Violent acts. But yet you will see them pushing this idea through Carmelo Anthony, trying to reinforce this idea that black people are just so violent. We are just so innately just doomed to criminality. When history continues to show us that white people, y'all niggas be wreaking havoc, okay? Anyways, let's continue. Cursing the Negro and surging dangerously around the car, one witness said. The crowd frightened Flake until he cowered in a corner of the coach. D.P. White, chief clerk on the train, stepped to the doorway and ordered the mob away, threatening to shoot the first person who attempted to mount the car. Such an ambush makes it clear that Hall County was not immune to the waves of white terrorism that were transforming Forsyth in 1912. But while that October saw numerous attacks against blacks in Hall, by the time winter arrived, things had calmed down, and the band of night riders gave up their efforts to create another white man's county on the eastern bank of the Chattahoochee. Given that the racial cleansing succeeded on one side of the river but failed on the other, it is natural to wonder what made the difference. Why was the expulsion of African Americans part of Forsyth County's identity for nearly why was the expulsion of African Americans part of Forsyth County's identity for nearly 100 years, but only a brief episode in the history of Hall? That's an interesting question. The attack on Bill Hearst provided some clues. Hearst was a black sharecropper like my daddy, who is only 63 years old. Well, will be 63 years old. Who lived and worked in Hall County on the property of a wealthy white planter named Raymond Carlisle, whose farm was not far from the railroad siding where W.A. Flake had narrowly escaped a lynching. The Gainesville News reported that on Monday, October 14th, just 2 days after the train was ambushed, 5 night riders went to a Negro house on Mr. Raymond Carlisle's place and tried to force Hearst and his family to flee. But unlike in Forsyth County, the paper noted, the night riders met with such opposition as all like marauders ought to meet with, a shotgun at the hands of the property owner. Hallelujah. The shooting occurred at about 10 o'clock at the house of Bill Hearst, colored. Mr. Carlisle lost no time. He made up his mind that his sharecroppers should not be run off. When he had heard the shooting at his tenant's house, Carlisle, the owner, grabbed his shotgun and went to the place to protect his Negroes and his property. That's a bit much. He returned the fire and followed the marauders, winding up with the capture of Tobe Tullis and securing information enough to identify other participants in the outlawry. So one of the people that he captured, that he refers to as a marauder, is Tobe Tullis. He's one of the mob members. When the shooting was over and Carlisle knew that Hearst and his family were safe, he delivered his prisoner, Tobe Tullis, to the Hall County Sheriff, William Crow, and gave a full report. The next morning, Crow and a posse of deputies rode out in pursuit of the other night riders who had attacked Carlisle black tenants. See, this may be a difference in opinion too, because at least the sheriff, the main sheriff, Bill Reed, back in Forsyth County, he's actually a part of the KKK. So the same people that were participating in Night Riders was this man's fellow, his fellow compadres, you know what I'm saying? They were his homies. These niggas go to their little Ku Klux Klan meetings together. They motherfucking jerk off each other's cones, you know what I'm saying? And so it would make a little bit more sense that in Forsyth County, there wasn't no backlash against, the racist mobs. Where here in Hall, there is backlash because these white people is just like, nah, nigga, you ain't having it. Even the rich white people in Forsyth was scary. They was like, oh my goodness, we want our employees, but we don't want no problems with you poor white people. Y'all are crazy. It's more of y'all than us, and you're armed. It's kind of like how we seen with the January 6th thing. All them white people show up, poor white people at that, a couple of armed ones. The government is like, hell no. Okay, we outnumbered by black people, but at least black people, a small percentage of them have been programmed into this, don't fight us, right? Anti-opposition. They don't fight. They go along with what we do. On top of the fact that we've convinced the rest of society to demonize and criminalize black people. So even if we don't immediately do it, somebody else gonna do it. So then, you know what I'm saying? It's easier to snatch up black people when you got society looking at black people like they motherfucking are wayward criminals, where society has been programmed that white is right. White is angelic. It's meant to preserve and secure. And so when white people start wreaking havoc, it's like, they have a reason to be out here wreaking havoc. Let's just hide. That's the society we live in called the United States of America, induced by white people, white men. But please don't muddy that with me saying white men, because I think a lot of stuff goes unnoticed, like how the hold, the control, the actions of white women has played in the United States. See, because systemically, societally, women have been viewed as bottom of the totem pole. Women are smart. We done seen to watch a handmaid. These women to make these dudes think that the idea is theirs. Whole time they planted the idea into their head and they got exactly what they wanted. It's kind of like how people perceive Hillary Clinton to have ran the political office when her husband Bill Clinton was in spot. He was getting sucked off by prostitutes. She was running America. The same thing is alleged when it comes to, like, I think it was Nixon's wife or some trash. One of them. There's actually quite a few of them. Where it's like the women in their lives was feeding into this idea like, yeah, submissiveness, subservient to this man. Whole time running everything, including the world. But let's continue. Anyways. The men alleged to be in the party of Night Riders are Will Jenkins, Bud, and Jess Martin, Tobe Tullis, and Wash Fagan, warrants for each of whom are in the hands of officers. Tobe Tullis was the only one captured on the night of the attack, and he is languishing behind the bars of Hall County Jail, while the officers are looking for the other men, all of whom will be captured if they do not get out of the country. All of whom will be captured if they do not get out of the country. All of whom will be captured if they do not get out of the county. Just before the Gainesville News went to press, the editors added a last-minute update. Bud Martin, Will Jenkins, and Wash Fagan were arrested, readers learned, by Messrs. Lon Spencer and John Tanner, and brought to Gainesville on train number 12 and lodged in jail. Mr. Spencer was sworn in as a deputy by Sheriff Crow and returned to Flowery Branch to take active charge of the situation. He will apprehend any others who may engage in night riding or the commission of other unlawful acts. The officers and the people are going to put an immediate stop to the depredations, the night riding, and warning of good Negroes to leave must stop, and stop at once. So we're going to run that back. The officers and the people are going to put an immediate stop to the depredations, the night riding, and warning of good Negroes to leave must stop and stop at once. Now, this whole deputizing sheriffs, I'm a bit of a crossroad here, because earlier in this book we saw by William Reed, he was deputizing his fellow KKK members to be police officers, to be sheriffs, to help him round up Negroes. It's actually been happening on both sides, where this one act, deputizing randoms, which majority of the time it seemed like majority of those that were deputized were white men. A lot of uneducated, just random. It's like the regular Joe Schmoes, poor, right? Basically what we see now with our police force, majority of them are hired on with little to no education. And when I say that, I mean the main requirement is a high school diploma. If not for nothing, we see how easy it is to get a high school diploma in the United States. It's not really indicative on your intellect, I know several people who just been handed motherfucking diploma. Can't read, can't comprehend what they read, could barely speak, they have like speech impediments. Motherfucking math is a struggle. And I'm not saying this to put nobody down. It's like, it's a very, very common issue in America. Very common. And it's not just amongst youth. From the ages of 100 all the way down to toddler, you can see incompetence, illiteracy. Just saying. But anyways, I ain't with that deputizing thing because it has shown to have had a negative effect. Anyways, though Sheriff Crow was himself a distant cousin to the white girl who had been murdered just across the river, he told reporters that he had every intention of finding and arresting whites who engaged in violence against black families. This is interesting because the family members of the little girl back in Forsyth County was all for, let's kill all the black people. We were told that y'all believe it was them. Let's get them. This guy, he's like, she my kinfolk, but now we got to arrest all these white people that's engaged in violence against black people. So then he goes to say, we don't need any military because we're going to break this thing up ourselves. Tobe Tullis, Bud Martin, Will Jenkins, and Wash Fagan were tried and convicted for the attack on Hearst, and soon thereafter, 5 more white men went to jail for driving bricklayers off W.A. Gaines' job site in downtown Gainesville. So I think the issue necessarily isn't, to me, it's perceived that it's not necessarily him apprehending these people for the inhumane act of chasing off the black people, for taking the laws into your own hands and becoming a vigilante, but it's because of the effect that the removal, the displacement of these black folk on these wealthy white people's property. And remember, I always told y'all, the police are asset protection, who is given a little bit more leeway by the courts than the security guards that we see at the local malls and the motherfucking Rosses. You see what I'm saying? But they're the same, asset protection. Once again, the names of the perpetrators appeared on the front page of the Gainesville Times. Horace Smith, Tom Hall, Newt Strickland, John Strickland, and Tolman Strickland, a bunch of kinfolk, were convicted for interfering with persons engaged in lawful pursuits. So I guess interfering with the cops or something? These prosecutions stand out against the backdrop of Jim Crow, Georgia, as rare instances in which white offenders were punished for violence against blacks. Still rare here in 2025. One witness to the raids at Forsyth later said, if we could have gotten a few detectives in here right at the start and convicted 1 or 2 of the night riders, the rest would have been frightened. By pursuing and jailing the first, boldest offenders in Hall, legal officials sent a message that whites in Forsyth never had to consider. See? Because because Hall actually did their job. They used arrest as a deterrent. Not only are they incapacitating crime, so they preventing the fact that these people could inflict any more crime, but they're ensuring that this punishment is a deterrent. It is something that others like them look at and be like, I'm gonna stay away from this because I don't want to end up like them. It's kind of like how racist white people beat up black people, strung them up, killed them and stuff, and was like, you see this, niggas? Y'all bet not motherfreaking try to even defend one another. Don't even defend yourself because you'll end up just like this one. Deterrent. Anyways. By pursuing the jailing the first boldest offenders in Hall, legal officials sent a message that whites in Forsyth never had to consider. That the power of the locally elected government will be brought to bear on lawless white men, even when their victims were black. As Royal Freeman Nash put in The Crisis, when the crackers in the Hall County started to make a sweep of their own country, of their own county, at the same time the word went out, according to local gossip, to spend $10,000 if necessary to crush the thing in its infancy. 11 arrests were made within 24 hours after the terrorization started, and it was decided in just a few days. I mean, that's even projected in the studies of criminality where, like, swiftness is a thing, where if you don't punish someone quickly, you run the risk of never really nipping it in the bud. You see what I'm saying? You run the risk of never addressing the problem and stopping it, which we've seen in Forsyth. They dragged on holding them people accountable. So more and more people were starting to just roll up in there. It's like, oh, I'm hopping on this. I mean, there's little to no repercussions for us, even if we start purging people. Where Hall was like, nah, as soon as they came in, they was like, we made 11 arrests within the first 24 hours that the terrorization started. Then we spent $10,000 to crush this in its infancy. So as soon as it started, they was like, here's $10,000. We're going to crush it as it just began. So we ain't got to worry about it getting too big. Forsyth, they failed. It got too big. And now Forsyth County is one of those counties that is known for the expulsion of black folk. Georgia was still Georgia. And in 1912, emancipation's guarantee of freedom was still in many ways an empty promise. But when hundreds of Forsyth refugees crossed Brown's Bridge and stepped onto the eastern bank of the Chattahoochee River, they were right to feel some small measure of relief. In Hall County, at least, it was still a crime to kill a black man. That's the end of chapter 10. Sheesh, in Hall County, at least, it was still a crime to kill a black man. Well, at least one county of many in Georgia maintain that sentiment, because it's crazy that murder is illegal except when inflicted by white people upon black people. It's crazy. I just hope that you learn something from these videos. Share it, like it, comment, tell me what your thoughts are. Bring these conversations into the privacy of your home. Get the dialogue going, because I personally believe that change comes through knowledge, for God said it in his word. His people perish for a lack of knowledge. We see incompetency, illiteracy. We see that this stuff is running roughshod, you know what I'm saying? And majority of the people that are negatively affected by what's happening in society are those that are ignorant. So we definitely need to be informed, and we need to encourage the passing of information through dialogue. I love y'all. God bless. Peace. If you want people to think otherwise of you more positively, then give them more positive experiences.